committee tonight. As some folks may know, and Commissioner Balaki gave me permission to share this, Commissioner Balaki had to have heart surgery earlier this week. He's recovering well. I know he emailed many folks, and many of you may be his constituents and on here and got the original email. But he will obviously not be joining us tonight since he just had surgery 2 days ago, but just wanted to let folks know that he's doing quite well so far. We have just one item on our agenda tonight, the last Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee meeting of 2022, and in fact, the last ANC 1C meeting of all of 2022. And we are going to hear about a planned residential conversion of 1825 to 1875 Connecticut Ave Northwest, which is commonly known as the Universal Building. I think a lot of folks think of it as in DuPont Circle. It's on the very far southwest edge of the Adams Morgan ANC. And we're going to hear from the folks. Sean, could you promote Josh, and then Josh can let us know, or if there's anyone else, Josh Goldbart, I don't know how to say his last name. Sorry about that, Josh. And
yeah,
Josh,
no problem.
And Josh can let us know if anyone else needs to be promoted as well.
Great, Josh, you should be good to go.
And I guess I'll just note, hi. Hi. I'll just note for everyone's context, we'll hear a presentation and see a presentation, and which, Josh, you can feel free to share your screen. I think that's probably the simplest thing. We are, this project, my understanding is that this project will need some zoning, some approvals from the Board of Zoning. However, the BZA, sorry. However, we're not considering any exceptions or any vote on that today. This is a preliminary discussion of this project with no official ANC action plan to be taken, and there'll be an opportunity for commissioners and members of the public to ask questions. I think, Josh, if people have big questions in the middle, maybe about like, oh, what does that mean? People can raise their hands, but sort of if you have an overarching question that is not about a specific thing that you're not understanding, please hold that to the end. And I think I think that is it. Josh, if you want to take it away.
Okay, I think that sounds great. Abigail, our colleague, is going to share the screen. And can everyone hear me?
Yep. Okay,
great. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to meet you, especially Megan and Jake, face-to-face online. So thanks for having us tonight. We really appreciate you allowing us to present what we're really excited to build, and letting us come in a little early. We have been talking for the past couple of weeks about our project, and we're really excited to be here today and walk you through our vision. I'm Josh Gelbart, and I am with Post Brothers. My colleague here, who I'm going to introduce briefly at this moment and then kick it back over to her in a minute, will be talking after I do. Serena Rose, our Senior Vice President of Development. So Post Brothers was founded in Philadelphia in 2006 by Mike and Matt Pestrunk to focus on multifamily Class A developments. That's what we do best, and we feel really comfortable there, and we're excited to be bringing some of that to Washington. Since we founded, we've developed 25 properties with over 6,000 units at a cost of over $4 billion. We have done adaptive reuse conversions from office, amongst other types, and we've done gut renovations of existing residential and ground up construction. All these projects have been multifamily centric, and we believe we have done more conversion of office to residential than anyone outside of New York in the last decade. We have developed a specialty in large scale million-foot projects like this one, where there is a large amount of units, and that allows us to build what we call category killer amenities at scale. That makes sense. We're really, really, really excited for this project and additional similar opportunities in the district. That said, converting a building usually has some challenges. And there's a few, especially when converting a rather bland office building of this vintage into desirable residential project. And Serena, again, our senior vice president of development, will talk a little bit about the building and our goals with the project. So I'll let her do that now. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening, everyone. As Josh said, my name is Serena Rose. I am the Senior Vice President of Development for Post Brothers. My voice doesn't normally sound like this. I'm recovering from a pretty doozy of a cold. So bear with me a little bit. In addition to Josh Gelbart, I'm joined by some of our colleagues of the project team tonight. Erwin Andres of Grove Slade is our traffic engineer. He's on. Zach Williams, our counsel from Venable, and Gary Handel from Handel Architects. It is my pleasure to introduce for you our thoughts on this project, which we hope will leave you with a lasting impression that not only is this team well equipped and determined to deliver a world-class solution for this site, but we are also extremely motivated to set the highest bar for this type of office and residential conversion project. The site is located, as you said, at 1825 and 75 Connecticut Avenue. It's bounded by Connecticut and Florida Aves to the south and T Street to the north. The site itself is actually three-sided, and as you probably know, is nestled between three ANCs. We land entirely in Adams Morgan, but we also kiss both DuPont Circle and at Florida Avenue and Colorama Heights at Connecticut. From our perspective, we could not be happier with this location. We're located at the intersection of the three best neighborhoods in our perspective. Anyone could want to be part of. Our design solution started with the carefully thought out selection of Handel Architects, who were handpicked for their skill and world-renowned reputation for adaptive reuse projects that are timeless, contextually appropriate, and beautiful. We will be rebranding the building, the Geneva, if you might have noticed, a name which provides for us inspiration and has and will continue to ground our efforts to adapt the 60s office building for residential use. The conversion itself will entail a facade replacement. The structure will remain intact, but the facade will be essentially replaced with a new one, with features and proportions inspired from the richness found in the most admired residential architecture in European American cities. We are not going to historify the building, but we will be taking cues from the past to help us detail the facade in a way that is distinctly residential. The building will become a place that people desire to live in. It will have an elegance to it that is reflective of those noteworthy examples that I referred to before. High quality design and a design that is worthy of this site. We very much look forward to your feedback, insight, and recommendations for improving upon our vision. Nothing's in stone here. Thank you very much for your time. With that, I will turn it over to Gary Handel, founder of Handel Architects, to take you through the proposed solutions, design solutions, that is, for this incredibly exciting project. Gary?
Thank you, Serena. And let's go next, Abigail. Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Handel, and I'm the managing partner of Handel Architects. And as Serena mentioned, we're the architects for this project. Our firm is comprised of over 200 architects, planners, and designers with work around the world. Some of our most notable projects include the 9/11 Memorial in New York City and some of the most sustainable residential, commercial, and institutional projects around the world. We've done more than 150 large-scale multifamily projects, including around a dozen in the district and its surroundings. We love to work on projects that we think will have a positive impact on the communities in which they are located, and to work with owners that we believe share our values. And we firmly believe that this is such a project. Our goal for this project is to transform this well-located, outdated building into a contributing asset to the neighborhood. And we envision recreating the building as something timeless, classic, and elegant, a place that you'd be proud to call home. So go next. And you can see the site plan and photographs of the existing building on this slide. And as Josh mentioned, it's a triangular footprint bordered by Florida, Connecticut, and T Streets. There's a significant grade change to be accommodated across the site with vertical grade differential of over 30 feet from the intersection on Florida and Connecticut to T Street. Currently, there are 2 office buildings on the site, Universal South, designed by Leroy Warner in 1956, and Universal North, designed by Edwin Way in 1962. These buildings were not inappropriate for their time, but the relentless and overpowering facades of these buildings are not up to current standards, nor do we believe they make a positive contribution to the neighborhood. As Serena mentioned, we will be totally stripping off the existing cladding, replacing it with something more refined in its modulation, proportion, and materiality to make it more suitable for its intended residential use. We'll be demolishing the theater appendage along Florida Avenue in order to make room for the new entry garden, creating a sense of arrival and a sense of home. And let's go next. And here you can see a view from the corner of T Street in Florida, looking towards the south. You can see the 2 wings of the buildings as they would look after being renovated, framing the new entry garden. As you can see, we took inspiration, as Serena mentioned, from the modern but classically inspired residential architecture that could be found throughout the district itself, but also in great cities in Europe, such as Paris and London, along with the pre-war elegance that can be found on New York's Upper West Side along Central Park on Park Avenue. Here you can see a glimpse of the architectural strategy to break the building up into a number of different components. We'll be using a stone facade to evoke characteristics that the classic and elegant residential designs of the best buildings of those cities have. You can see the 2 wings of the repurposed buildings here. On the northern wing, which is the one closest to us in the perspective, we've replaced the existing penthouse with 1 new floor plus a penthouse structure containing the building's mechanical systems, as well as a number of apartment units. All of the mechanical systems will be fully screened with facades in keeping with the building's elegance. On the southern wing, which is the wing furthest from us, we've replaced the existing penthouse with 2 new floors plus a penthouse structure containing more fully screened mechanicals, as well as some of the building's amenities. This includes a large outdoor terrace for the use of all of the residents of the building. All of this is within the as of right 100-foot tall building height limit, plus the 20-foot allowance for penthouse structures. As you can see in this rendering, we've employed large solariums on the new upper floor corners to bring light into the corner units, which are especially deep in plan due to the large floor plates established by the existing office uses. These solariums also provide a strong visual anchor for the building's corners and a strong contrast to the building's stone facades. And next. And then looking from the south, from the intersection of Florida, looking up towards T Street, you can again see those solariums and how they become a distinctive feature on all of the major corners of the building. Given that we're converting a 1950s, 1960s era Washington, D.C. office building to a multifamily residential building, we've had many challenges. Office buildings typically have especially large and deep floor plates, and this one, being triangular, has some even deeper floor plates than typical. We employed a series of upper level setbacks and a large interior court in the southern wing to help us address the floor plate size without making apartments that would be unusably deep and dark. We've tried to find creative and nuanced ways to solve these problems, and we feel that these solutions can create a great example of how these types of less productive buildings can be adapted for new uses. In fact, we hope that this building can become a prototype for the replacement and transformation of outdated commercial buildings that can still be found throughout the core of many American cities. The building has great views, sitting high up on a hill, and we'd like to bring in those views to as many units as possible. One of the strategies is to use balconies of several different types, including Juliet balconies, inset balconies, and terraces on setback levels. We've placed a large amenity terrace on the south side of the southern wing, and which you can see at the just at the in the foreground upper of this of this building. And then through these strategies, we think we've been able to have the building meet the sky in a much more graceful manner. And go next. This view is from the southwest corner, looking at the Connecticut Avenue facade with the one of the entrances to the residential, one of the courts between the two wings of the building, visible in the distance. On these longer facades, we've used a series of bay windows, strips of Juliet balconies, inset terraces, and areas of punch windows contrasted with areas of floor-to-ceiling glass to syncopate and modulate these facades and introduce an elegant proportionality to the elevations. Both the upper floors as well as the penthouses take advantage of a series of setbacks to accent the top of the building and evoke the classic pre-war elegance that we mentioned earlier. They also soften the distinction between the building and its penthouses and allow the additional natural light to be brought into those units. On this facade specifically, you can see how the penthouse setback above is quite significant in an attempt to reduce the bulk where the building is at its highest off of adjacent grade and to afford all residents access to the amenity terrace to enjoy the phenomenal views over the district. We've also used, as mentioned, a variety of architectural elements to break up these long facades and provide articulation between the building segments, and to then create elements of verticality along the facade, which relieves the length that exists. And again, those elements are the bay windows, the Juliet balconies. And if you look at those Juliets, basically there'll be a high degree of attention paid to them with details of stone and metal railings. On the projecting balconies, there will be a different vocabulary of railings with stone, metal, and glass parapets. And on the inset balconies on the upper levels, those bring that more natural light into those units, as we mentioned, and create greater setbacks and areas for larger terraces on those floors. And go next. And so this view is from the northwest corner, looking at the corner of T Street and Connecticut Avenue, with that long court between the two wings of the building, again visible on the right. And you can see again the elements that we've spoken about, those solariums on the corners, the bay windows that go down on Connecticut Avenue, the Juliet balconies that turn around onto T Street, and then the setbacks at the top of the building that again soften the building's profile against the sky and basically create a more graceful transition to those penthouses. And along T Street, you can see a series at the bottom, a series of townhouses, which will be articulated with a masonry expression to create a series of individual units to this unique set of townhouse apartments. And you can see those on the lower left floors. And go next, and here you can see the building section. And so you have the intersection of Florida and Connecticut on the right, and then up to T Street on the left. And so you can begin to get a sense of the grade change across those sites. And you can see where we're adding the new floors. And note that we plan to demolish a poorly built penthouse structure and build new floors above the red dashed line that will align with the more thoughtful design for residential architecture. You can also see how the two wings of the building connect both on the lower floors via the lobby and service spaces, as well as via an elevated corridor on the upper floors. You can also notice how that grade change is significant enough to create a multi-story differential, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide and show how it affects the residential entrances. And then in the center of the southern wing, which is on to the right of this plan, you can see here the large elevated courtyard, which we've created to help us tackle the overly deep floor plates and to provide ample amounts of natural light into the amenity spaces along on the edges of the building, showing the setbacks that we're using on the main facade. This courtyard is located on the top of existing parking that occupies the center of the southern wing. Regarding the parking, our traffic engineer will discuss this in more detail, but we currently are showing 454 parking spaces as proposed, down from 663 in the existing building. And go next. At the end of the renovation, the building will have a number of entrances for the residents in an effort to address the size of the building. The most grand of these will be off of the entry garden at what we were calling the second floor level. There are additional entries on the third level off of Connecticut Avenue, as well as 2 more convenience entrances along T Street along the 3rd and 4th level. We've tried to place active retail uses all along the street frontages, with the exception of where lobby entrances and the occasional points of egress are located. And you can also see here the entry garden, which is being designed by Hollander Design, who we consider one of the finest landscape architects in the world, and how we're bringing cars, loading vehicles, trash vehicles, and residents into the site. Cars will enter here, drop off here, and enter the garage. There'll also be another garage entrance off of T Street. Loading will occur off of Florida and T as well. And then there will be a pedestrian path up through the arcade that connects Florida Avenue with the main lobby. And go next. This presentation follows the exact same format that we presented to BZA. Zach Williams, who will follow me from Venable, will address the issues raised in this and several of the other slides in the presentation. So let's go next. And so on this diagram, we're highlighting the resultant lot after combining parcels 1 and 2. So this was consolidated a few years ago. And so this will be developed as one building as a single unified project. All of the zoning references will be based on it being one single lot. The orange area shows the demolition of the existing theater, which is being done to accommodate the entry garden that we've described, and as well as to create sufficient space to accommodate the on-street turnarounds and loading when the building is adapted to residential use. And then next. And then here you can see the existing building footprint in gray, and the existing penthouses are highlighted in blue with varying setback distances at the penthouse level. And next. And then the proposed building footprint is shown in gray, showing the reduction in the overall site coverage by the removal of the existing theater. The proposed penthouse footprint is highlighted in blue, and you can see how we've set back the penthouse structure on the southern portion to both allow for a large amenity deck, taking advantage of the extraordinary views, as well as to reduce the visual bulk of the building from grade. The existing penthouses are outdated, unattractive, and not suited for the new residential use. And the goal is for the new penthouses to be in keeping with the classical elegance of the new architecture. And we'll move through this one and go to and this one, and then here. This is again showing the rendering taken from the corner of Connecticut and T, and so that we can begin with Zach a more detailed discussion of some of the upper level setbacks. And again, you can see the strategies that we mentioned before, present in this rendering. The facade's broken up into a number of different vertical elements separated by balconies, bay windows, and articulated on the corners by those solariums. The significant setbacks at the upper levels, it's often the building's transition to the sky. And again, the idea of really repurposing the building, to something that we think can be quite extraordinary, beautiful, and a productive contribution to the neighborhood. And with that, I'll turn it over to Zach Williams of Venable. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Zach Williams. I'm a land use attorney with Venable, and I'm going to take a couple minutes tonight to summarize the zoning relief that we'll be seeking for this project. On a high level, I want to mention that this project is mainly a by right, as of right project, in that the conversion of office to residential in this zone, this is the MU9B zone, is permitted as of right And Post Brothers is proposing height and density that is also within the permitted parameters of the MU9B zone. However, because we are converting, as Gary said, a 1960s era building into a residential building for the 2020s, there's certain aspects of the structures that require zoning relief to bring these into a world-class residential building for today. And those are mainly three different items. First is penthouse setbacks. The second is court width and area. And the third is side yards. Each of these areas of zoning relief can be granted through a special exception from the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Just at the end of last week, we filed our BZA application. However, that is still in its preliminary review phase and has not yet been accepted. We don't have a hearing date yet, but we'll be sure to let you know as soon as we get one. Here on this slide, you can see I've referenced the three zoning provisions from the zoning regulations that permit the relief that we're seeking through a special exception. Next slide, please. As you're probably familiar, in DC, special exceptions are granted as long as you can meet two general standards. And the first is that the relief must be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zone. The second is that the relief must not adversely affect neighboring properties. There's some additional technical requirements, but these are the sort of most important standards that the BZA typically considers. So I'm going to be walking through these over the next few minutes. Next slide. With respect to the penthouse setbacks that Gary touched upon in his presentation, there's a number of reasons why we need this relief for this project. Number one, design considerations. We're converting, as Gary mentioned, an office building from the 1960s to a world-class residential building with amenities and gathering spaces. This requires, it's a challenge, and it requires a number of design decisions that require relief from a zoning perspective. For example, the footprint, layout, the structural and mechanical issues in the existing buildings are all issues that we need to accommodate as we look to do this conversion. And the current penthouses are actually already out of conformance. If that building was built the way it is today, it wouldn't be permitted. So that's just one example of how we're struggling. We have to struggle with what we have there on the ground and converting this building. And the only way to do that is with zoning relief. So the setbacks that we're proposing for the penthouses will require relief in certain areas. From a general standpoint, the zoning regulations require a 1-to-1 setback. So in this case, the penthouses are 20 feet tall. They require a 20-foot setback. On certain areas of the building, the setback proposed will be less than that. In other areas of the building, the setback will be quite a bit more than that. And for example, on what we think of as the most prominent corner of the building at the corner of Florida Ave and Connecticut Ave, the highest point of the building, that's where the greatest setbacks are being provided. So far more than is required. Whereas on other areas of the building, the setbacks are a little bit less than 20 feet. And the reason for that is because, again, mechanical, structural issues that we have to deal with, as well as design considerations, given these existing buildings today. Next slide, please. The second item of relief that we need is for courts. Courts are sort of a quirky technical item in the zoning regulations. And so to try to explain this, I'll start with the largest and most prominent court on the site, and that is a court that already exists. These two building wings were originally built as two buildings and then connected over time. In between those two buildings is a court. That's considered a court because in the DC zoning regulations, anytime you have two building walls that face one another, that can be a court. And so here, when we add to these buildings and add additional height, that court needs zoning relief. So this is a great example of an existing condition. When you do a conversion and an addition on that condition, you need relief to be able to do that, even though that court is currently in conformance today. The other courts that we are proposing on the building that need zoning relief are all located at the very highest levels of the building. And as Gary touched upon, there's good reason for those courts and why they're being proposed. Some of those reasons include providing outdoor terraces, bringing light and air into the building, and other structural, mechanical, and design considerations, really, again, to facilitate converting a 60s era office building into a residential building. We believe that these courts will have minimal impact on neighboring properties because the largest court already exists. It's inward facing to the site. So those, if there are any impacts, they're all facing inwards to the site. And the other courts are at the very highest level, as I mentioned, of the building. So they're the least visible from the ground. Next slide, please. Finally, the last item of relief that we'll need from the BZA is side yards. Now, the side yards are actually not going to be changing. The existing footprint of the building currently has side yards that are not in conformance with the zoning regulations. And because we are going to be adding to this building, we are now required to bring those side yards into conformance through a special exception. So attempting to create side yards at only the highest level of the building would be very awkward. It would look odd, and it really wouldn't serve any purpose since the existing footprint is what it is. And so we think this zoning relief that we're seeking shouldn't have any impacts on neighbors, since for the most part, the majority of these buildings already exist as built, and those side yards are going to stay exactly as they have been since the late 50s and early 60s. And that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'm now going to turn it over to our traffic engineer, Erwin Andrus.
Great, thanks, Zach. Good evening. My name is Erwin Andrus, and I'm with Grove Slate Associates. I'm principal and vice president of our DC office. In terms of the location, I believe everybody knows where it is, so we can basically skip this slide. What we've identified on the screen is essentially the proposed trip generation associated with the proposed program. Typically, retail per square foot and office per square foot generates more traffic than residential per square foot as a result of converting the existing office complex from office to residential. And by reducing the amount of retail on site, the overall traffic impacts are, as you can see, significantly less during the morning and afternoon peak hours. In addition to that, if you notice, we are reducing the number of spaces. However, if you look at the number of spaces per residential unit and per retail, we are what the district would consider highly parked. And we understand that there's competition for parking, and for new residential developments, this parking ratio is actually higher than anything we've worked on. And it's important to note that we have worked on the most significant mixed-use developments in the district, projects like City Center, the Wharf, the Yards. So we have a good handle on the amount of parking for residential developments, and this development has more than adequate parking. Next slide. Gary had identified the access points that are proposed to serve the site. The left condition is the existing condition, where there are 3 curb cuts, and this is given the pre-existing office use. On the right is the proposed condition. The proposed condition is geared to address the fact that we have 2 residential towers. As a result, in order to facilitate loading and trash for those 2 towers, we've identified loading facilities on both on T Street and Florida Avenue. In addition to that, we're essentially maintaining the residential curb cut on T Street, and on Florida Avenue. It was important for the project to provide a significant amount of on-site stacking and queuing. What we've experienced on other projects in the district, the need to provide space for Ubers and for short-term food deliveries and things of that nature. It was our intent to make sure that we were able to accommodate as much of that on site to minimize its impact on the surrounding neighborhood streets. So with that, I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was super informative and very thorough. So I certainly have a couple of questions. I know there were a couple being raised in the Q&A that I think have mostly been answered. But so I'll start with a couple of questions. Commissioner Falaschini, obviously, feel free to raise your hand. And attendees, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hands as well. So I guess I'll just say I think this is a super exciting project. I think, but that building is very ugly, and I have thought that for years. So I think that this new building is much more attractive, and I think it's really I think we already had some questions from people or confusion from people thinking it was being demolished because it looks so different with the facade. So I think this has been helpful information, and I think it's really impressive how different it looks and how much more it just looks much nicer. So I guess some folks have asked about the timeline of construction. I think I had heard that it was, you were hoping to potentially do construction by next fall 2023. Is that the case?
Probably this maybe the spring of 2024. We would like to start earlier. It really, frankly, depends on the entitlement process. We would love to start sooner.
Great. And I guess from my perspective, I am leaving the ANC at the end of this month, at the end of my term, so I will not get to vote on this. But I think the requested exceptions all seem really really reasonable. And thank you for explaining that so thoroughly and clearly, because also these zoning regulations, of course, are often very confusing for someone who's not steeped in it. I had another question, a couple other questions, but I'll ask one, and then I'll let Commissioner Falaschini ask a few. So I had a question about the ground floor, the retail, and I know you mentioned you're leaving in quite a bit of retail. Do you know yet how those spaces will be? Will they be mostly big spaces? The current building has some smaller retail, like Universal Donut and a couple other smaller places. Will there still be small spaces that might work well for small businesses versus large ones like the current Office Max or Office Depot that's there?
Abigail,
sure.
Abigail, would you mind showing the first 3 floors? Just to remind everybody, because of the elevation difference from one side of the site to the other being 35 feet vertical, the retail and the first floor has to be kind of shown on 3 levels. Gary, would you like to walk them through the 60,000 square foot of retail that we're providing?
Let me unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, so you can see from left to right as we move up the site, the retail follows the grade. So the yellow being the retail. So we have the piece that's on the corner at the intersection of Florida and Connecticut, and what we call the prow, at the point of the triangle, and that is suitable for division. We're not sure, like how that will work. And then as we come up along Connecticut, the retail is shallow depth, which is where those smaller retailers are currently located, and that depth will remain suitable for those smaller retailers. And then if you look also at, and go back to what we're considering the second floor, which is our first ground floor, at the intersection of Florida and T is another small-ish chunk of retail in a very prominent location, on the corner there, and at the entrance to our entry garden. So that will be another great, for a smaller format retailer. And then as we go up to the corner of Connecticut and T, we wind up with retail that could be done with a smaller format and a larger format. Some of it gets deep, so that it would, so the deeper space that goes into the interior of the building will be better suited for a larger unit. But so I think the opportunities that are, that currently exist for the smaller retailers will be preserved in many locations along the perimeter.
I would also like to
and not
add,
to like, sure, mind if I take this one?
yeah, please.
Not to like belabor the retail question, because it's a great one and it's really, really important to us. The retail is, like Gary just walked us through, and Serena had a really great point that the ground floor is like really spread across 3 different floors with the angles of the site. So we have lots of it in different locations. The spaces are set up for chunks of where it makes sense within our programming to have it at the moment. We want to have a mix of retailers here, all things that are additive to the neighborhood. For us, retail is a addition to our building for our residents and for the residents of the neighborhood. So while we are underwriting a certain amount and we want to get rents, we will wait for the right person to come in. We won't fill it with just anybody to get rent. We want to get really fantastic restaurants in here. We want to get things that are going to be amenities for the people that live in this neighborhood and the people that live in this building. Things that are just really fantastic, really great spaces to be, that will enliven the street, which we think is especially important along Connecticut, which is kind of a dead corridor right now, or like right there specifically. So.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Falskini, did you have?
You and my apologies for the fact that I'm actually on the road, traveling for the holidays. So sorry for the weird background and everything behind me, and the shadowy facade. But so I wanted to ask a couple of questions about it. The biggest concerns for me coming into this, all of the special exceptions seem completely reasonable. The biggest concerns that I come into this are affordability and affordable housing for the neighborhood, and making sure that we're hitting those marks. So I guess the first question is, are you planning on just paying into the trust fund, or are you planning on actually providing the affordable housing units that would be required for a unit of the size and density by law?
Gary, you want to answer?
You go, take it, Josh.
Actually, Serena, I think you should answer this one.
We're planning on using the affordable units in the building at the moment. So, is there some feedback you guys can give us? I mean, what do you guys want to see as far as the nature of how the IZ works?
I mean, personally, I'd like to see as much IZ as absolutely possible.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to, I can't promise for the rest of the commission, but I certainly would be willing to even grant higher FAR and height exceptions to the building if we were to be able to provide more IZ. And then the other thing that I'd be really happy to talk with you all about is making sure that there's family size IZ units in the building.
Okay.
The school is really, it's changing quickly, and the neighborhood is changing quickly, and there are not a lot of like 3 and 4 bedroom units in the neighborhood that are available to families, and especially having at least a few family size IZ units would be fantastic.
Okay. Well, this is music to our ears. So.
Yeah, we are going to have family sized IZ. So
that's awesome. I think you'll find that this commission is very different from what it used to be, and is very different from many other in the city, in that we're very open to having conversations with developers about density and height in a trade-off for more affordability for our residents.
That's really great to hear, Jake. And certainly, yes, we don't want to do the pay to play. We want to build it in our building and maximize those bonuses. So
that's great. We're very open to that too, and would love to have the conversation going forward.
Excellent.
You answered the questions that I had about retail. The parking, so I'm probably going to give a response that's maybe different than you probably hear in most other places, which is, do you really need that many? And also, please make sure that you're accounting for the fact that 50% of our population are going to be driving electric vehicles within the next 10 to 15 years, and we absolutely need to have the kind of electricity going into the building that's going to be able to feed out level 2 chargers for our residents who are going to be needing that for their electric vehicles in the future.
We are all over that, way ahead of you. All of our projects have a robust amount of electric parking. This one will have more than what we have even done before. And it's already kind of incorporated in the seed for the electrical design for the project. PEPCO is aware of it already even. So that's a win for us. One thing we have found is that, even when we do provide parking that is more than what you would think would be needed, there are weekend travelers and those kind of things. Those individuals park there. They don't really move all week. And so we have found that it is important, and it is part of delivering a world-class solution to deal with that reality. Instead of burdening the streets with people who maybe have a car and act that way, it can be nicely tucked into the building. We will be reducing the amount of parking. We still will have probably more than double what most projects have. But we will also have a robust amount of bike spaces. They'll be more convenient to the elevators even than probably DDOT wants. So we may come back to you to help us, press them a little bit. We want everybody to be having convenient ways to access not only the street and public transit, but bike parking, and then the electric cars will all get priority spots.
And Jake, like the other part of this is a ton of the building is already parking. Repurposing it is really, really difficult. And we're doing the best we can. And that's where we're adding some of the amenities, and that kind of leads to some of the court situations that Zach was talking about. The other part of that is we're building big apartments, like you were talking about, those family size units. The people that rent those types of things, they have cars. They don't use them every day. Maybe they use it twice a month, once a month, but they need a place for it. And that's what we're providing here. It's an amenity that people of this caliber apartment are expecting to have a place to put their car. They may touch it once a month.
That makes sense. And I appreciate that. You're assessing your own market. So I get that. And I'm not gonna fight you on it. One thing to know too is
we'd love to have no parking.
Yeah, I'd be fighting you from a direction that you're probably not used to. But on the we are, working right now on basically turning Columbia Road into a bike highway. It'll have likely in the future, based on the current design proposal that is DDOT is working on, Columbia will have a concrete barrier separated bike lane all the way through, basically from Connecticut east-west, like clear across the city. So it's going to be a major bike commuting highway as well. And the fact that y'all are thinking about adding those types of facilities is music to my ears, because the city is very intent on hitting its numbers when it comes to converting people from car driving to bike riding as primary forms of transit. And in the kind of location that you're in, it's very feasible for a high percentage of your population who lives there to primarily commute either by walking or biking or taking metro. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's great to hear about the bike highway. That's really interesting.
It's a beautiful design. I really appreciate it. It's great. I love how thoughtful y'all have been about it. And I'm really excited to help work with you to make sure that this comes into the neighborhood. We need this housing so bad. And I just, the thoughtfulness with which y'all are approaching this is really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the other questions I had, Commissioner Felskini asked, which is part of why I let him cut in, because I thought he might have some of the same ones. I was going to ask about the IZ and whether it would be possible to cut the parking further. But I understand that I have been in that parking garage one time and I have seen how big it is. And so I can understand that it would be very difficult to do that. But if there are any ways to, I know there's a bike share, Capital Bike Share station near there. If there's a way to, DDOT sometimes builds bigger stations. If there's a way to expand that, if there's a way to, anything, it's great that you're going to have bike parking and electric vehicle chargers, but just definitely echoing what Jake said. There was one question in the Q&A that I think got put in the chat as well, is about older office buildings having environmental hazards. Have you surveyed the existing buildings for any mercury containing devices or asbestos containing materials? I don't know. I would assume most of that has probably been addressed over the years, but do you know if that has been?
We did do a full environmental phase 1. In some respects, a phase 2 is done. We did not identify any mercury containing like thermometers of that type, but there is lighting identified that would need to be maybe carefully removed. We're very accustomed to doing that in an appropriate manner. It's nice that people recognize that is sometimes an issue. We have some tanks in there that have secondary containment, things like that. We are doing additional research in the building on our own right now, and looking for anything that may be residual. That we kind of take the approach that we to the extent that we can remediate everything to the extent that it can be. And so even if something is left there and it's deemed closed, which is what the DEP uses as a term, we do our own due diligence and go one step further to the extent that we can. With regard to asbestos, that would be remediated before any of the facade, would kind of be peeled off. One tower is almost entirely remediated already, so it's really very limited, actually. So we're very lucky. Great. So if any members of the public have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. You can also put them in the Q&A. I know folks have already done that with a couple that have been answered. So feel free. Commissioner Falaschini, obviously, if you have any additional questions. If not, though, we may be able to wrap up this meeting. Obviously, I think since there's BZA approval needed, we look forward to hearing when there is a hearing date, and I think considering the special exceptions on the next year's PZT committee. But I think if no one else has any questions, thank you all so much. This was really interesting and clearly really thoughtful, and I think a super exciting project. It's also not often that something we're going to be talking about at our ANC meeting gets on the Washingtonian Problems Instagram. I don't know if you know that there were tweets about that, and then there was a whole comment section, and I was like, oh wow, this is so.
We saw the comments section.
Yeah, yeah, quite the interesting. So thank you all so much, and really appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank
really
you
appreciate
so much.
it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting us talk about this with you guys so quickly.
Thank you. All right, and that is the last item on our agenda. And so this meeting is over.
Wait,
Thanks,
hold
everybody.
on one second.
Oh,
Chair Faulkner, before we wrap up, I just wanted to take a second to thank you for your service to this committee, your service to the commission. We appreciate you so much. You're so thoughtful. You're so smart. You're such a valuable asset to the neighborhood. We're going to miss you and just wish you the absolute best. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Commissioner Falaskini. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor. I'm going to miss I'm going to miss the whole commission and everyone, but although I will not be totally gone, I will probably be joining the meeting about this next year. So